Are we live? Oh, it says we're live. Okay.
Oh, what up, baby?
Welcome to the Detroit Lions News Podcast. We figured we'd do a live show for once because we have to get ready for the whole season and we needed to get through this whole technical difficulties that we were going through. So we just wanted to do that because Tyler, all the people got to know that when we do the Kansas City Chiefs, the Detroit Lions season preview, those will also be live. So if you're new to the channel, you're not subscribed to our Between the Whistles page, or you're not subscribed to our podcast, you'll miss it. But we'll go live on Detroit Lions News just like we always have. I'm your host, Joe Chap, and that's Tyler, but he's gone right now. Um, we had some technical difficulties. That's why we started a little bit late. But we got a lot planned for you guys because I really want to talk about the Lions versus the Jags. I really want to talk about, is the offensive line depth a worry? And I want to talk about Brian Branch because
Gotta rock my JMO jersey, dog. You know it's not Stafford though. If you guys are wondering, you'll never know. You'll never know because I'm not turning around.
So, Tyler, just to tell people, what did you think about the Detroit Lions versus the Jaguars game? Like, what was your reaction to that?
I mean, we sucked, right? I think that a part of it is that, like, kind of what's worrisome about this team and what prevents us from being, like, really great is this stuff like this. Like, we started out really slow against the Giants. We started off really slow against the Jags. I think what that shows and tells me is that all of our talent lies in our top end. Like, we are deeper than we have been, but we are not deep enough to be like some of these teams, like the Eagles, the Niners. Like, some of these teams are so deep that guys go down, they can still make playoff runs. They can wait and hold up for them to get back. Without our top top end guys and our top talent, we're kind of screwed. So I think we need to focus on, like, obviously you need to put together your top end guys first, and that takes a while. That takes 3-4 seasons, and Brad Holmes has done a great job of that. But now we can see him sign, trade, and draft to get depth to really make this team full.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought, when you watch the Jaguars versus the Lions, the one thing that stood out to me was, like, it wasn't the depth that was the issue, because we all know that when you have offensive line depth in the NFL, it doesn't really last long. So when you don't have depth at people were talking about the offensive line depth. What I was really worried about was the wide receiver depth, because the wide receiver position is a huge position of need right now. And I know that Brett Holmes and Dan Campbell are going to make calls around the NFL to see if they can get a trade to going or call some free agents, because right now they're in a pickle, because if Marvin Jones goes down at any point, if Jameson Williams is out, obviously, if Josh Reynolds goes down eventually, you could be in a really big pickle with not having the wide receiver depth that you're expected to have. And that's what you worry about.
Well, and plus, like, I do think, like, we are getting to a position where we have such a young team. Like, we can go out and get, like, veteran guys for our depth, and it won't hurt us. Like, everyone before were like, oh, we need to go sign all these vets to basically make our roster, to, like, save our team, or to, like, give us something to compete with. And I think that seems to be the problem when you spend because Patricia did that. Bob Quinn did that for a little while, and a lot of other GMs will do it. They'll sign. They're thinking like, well, you can do it in the NBA, right? You can sign a bunch of vets or guys that are, like, really good, or you can go out and get a bunch of veterans, and you can try to start competing right away. In the NFL, when you try to open your window and create a team that you want to compete only by adding a ton of, like, veterans, that's kind of where it hurts you. I think veterans should be always used to be, like, a complementary piece, and whether that's to win, whether that's to wait to get guys back off of injury or suspension, or whether that's to help mentor the young guys. And our team is so young, we're actually in an amazing position right now to go out and get some veterans. I wouldn't mind seeing, like, a Julio Jones, T.Y. Hilton, Sammy Watkins, like someone that can come up here and they can give you 6-7 games of solid production with a comfortable veteran quarterback until JMO gets back. And then, it always helps to have a couple vets in the wide receiver room.
The only issue I have is, like, okay, if JMO does come back, when he comes back at the Baltimore game, right? You can't expect him to come in this game against Baltimore after he's been off for 6 weeks, right? He hasn't practiced because he's had this hamstring injury now. So you're expecting him to come in and produce right away. I don't see that happening. So you have to go get a wide receiver of some point. And there was a lot of people and there was a lot of publications that were talking about Corey Davis. Corey Davis, they should trade for Corey Davis. Well, guess what? He retired today. So that ain't happening. So if you're the Detroit Lions, you have to go find a wide receiver because I'm not worried about the offensive line depth. I'm really not, because when you look at the reality of the situation, Hank Fraley is an elite offensive line coach. And when you have an elite offensive line coach, you can ask the New England Patriots with Dante Scarnecchia. When you have an elite offensive line coach, you can get a lot done. You can get by on just coaching alone. You're not going to get by on just depth, but you're going to get by on coaching, because sometimes you're going to have to walk out some guys like Coyote Oshika in a game against Ed Oliver. You're going to have to walk out some of these guys and make sure that they kind of can play at a high level. At wide receiver, you need a guy who can go out there and grab, 3-4 catches and help you win. I mean, Tom Kennedy was huge last year for the Detroit Lions because he came in against Chicago. He made a crucial play, and that was the key. But, obviously this year they do have a reliable tight end, we think, in Sam Laporta. But when you look at the wide receiver depth, they're 1 to 2 injuries away from becoming like a very scary unit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can you still see me or no?
No.
No? Okay, I was just looking up. So there's a couple. I was just kind of looking at some of the available free agents. I was on another tab. It's my fault. So I got a question for you, right?
Right.
If you could choose one, or maybe just not one, but I can give you, maybe give me two that you would mind looking at. I mean, we've got Kenny Galladay, we have Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, Sammy Watkins, and T.Y. Hilton. I mean, if any of those guys coming as a veteran presence, is there one or two that you would favor over the rest, or are you looking completely elsewhere? I mean, just out of those main popular names, out of those 6 guys, like which one would you maybe consider?
I mean, if you're making me pick those guys, like I don't want Kenny Galladay because we don't have Stafford, and Stafford was obviously his lifeline.
He threw him open all the time. Yeah.
So if I'm gonna go with a wide receiver that I think still can contribute, I'm gonna go with Jarvis Landry. I just think he fits the profile for this team, but in reality, like they need a guy who can burn down the field. Like we know that Marvin Jones can go make high point catches. We know Josh Reynolds has the speed to get done, but they need someone just in case, Cleve Raymond is criminally underrated with this team. So.
I was hoping that we would I kind of was hoping that Mims would be that guy. Like,
yeah,
I don't think it's a skill thing. I think it's like I think he's kind of like one of those guys. He's kind of like lazy, bad attitude. I don't think he's a good culture fit for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think I just think I don't think he could stay healthy. That's an issue. Yeah. So that's a main issue.
Well, I heard a lot about him like bitching and groaning and griping about like stuff at practice, and just like didn't really seem to fit the mold. So
yeah, that's the sad part about this, because I think that if Denzel Mims would have worked out, that would have been a really good thing for the Detroit Lions.
Well, he's the prototypical guy you kind of want and need. I mean, he's 6'3", runs a 4.38. I mean, you kind of like
great. He was great coming out of Baylor, but the reality of the situation, he just couldn't get together. So so I was going to ask you, what's more concerning to you, the depth at offensive line or the depth at the wide receiver position?
I think what's more concerning and more important is, I mean, we both can kind of make it up in other areas, but I'm kind of more concerned about the depth at receiver.
Yeah.
And with that, the reason being, like, I know we can still orchestrate, and look, without our top couple guys last year, I mean, even when we had to roll out without JMO, obviously, without Amon-Ra, we still put up some good numbers. So, like, I shouldn't say I'm necessarily super worried, but at the same respect, like, our offensive line, as long as we have some of our main staples, as long as we have, Sewell, Ragnow, and Decker, like, I know the depth can be shaky there, but like I feel like it's a little bit easier for guys to like pick up the slack on like a backup guard or pick up the slack on somebody. Like, I mean, obviously, like we need to have some depth at like left tackle.
Yeah.
You need to have someone that can slide over there and like take care of business because that's your strong side. You're protecting the quarterback. But I think that, with our coaching staff and how we've been building this offensive line, it's not a huge concern for me just because, we have such top tier rocks at that position and that like guys that can hold it down. I'm not super concerned. And I feel like you can plug and play a lot of guys. I think, Glasgow is going to be a nice, depth piece, rotational guy. He might be starting. It just depends.
I don't worry about the offensive line.
No, I don't either.
And you brought up all the guys that you can mention, but here's what I say. With the offensive line, you look at one thing, Hank Fraley. Like Hank Fraley got Coyote Oshika ready to play Ed Oliver, and he actually stood up to Ed Oliver pretty damn well, considering the fact that it's Ed Oliver. It was Coyote Oshika's first game, and he was going against a guy who could literally rip you to shreds, and he didn't rip him to shreds. He had a decent game. He didn't have a great game against Coyote Oshika, and that's a credit to the coaching, which is Hank Fraley. That's why I don't worry about offensive line, because if you have a good offensive line coach, you can get around some things. You can get around not having the talent. You cannot get around not having talent at the wide receiver position.
One thing that kind of bothers me a little bit, and you don't know the whole side of it. You don't know if these guys want to leave to obviously see if they can get better opportunities for playing, or they think that they're not going to get more money here. But like, there was these rumors that Evan Brown was going to go get like 10 or 12 million a year. Yeah. Like he went and got a tiny contract from Seattle.
Well, here's the thing though. This is what people
we have not thrown an extra $500K or $1 million.
No,
and said,
but
hey,
this is what people don't understand. And Tyler, you're falling victim to it. When you are an offensive lineman, there is tons of starting jobs available right now in the NFL.
He wants to set himself up for a bigger payday later.
You can go to play. Let's say you're the Seattle Seahawks and you want to get Evan Brown, right? You're gonna say, Evan Brown, you come here, you start, you can earn a contract for bigger money, bigger payday, right? If you are a guy like, let's say, like Graham Glasgow when he left the first time, right? He went to Denver for the money because and the chance to start. So when you're an offensive lineman in the NFL and you could actually be pretty damn good at what you're doing, perfect time to cash in, because there are not a lot of good NFL offensive linemen in the league right now. Let's just be honest about it. There is not a lot of – when you got Garrett Bowles starting as a left tackle, you know that something's wrong, and that's exactly what's happening. So when you say, like, we lost Evan Brown for – you get through another bone at him, he probably just wanted to start.
Yeah, and I can see that, and I totally get that. Like I said, a lot of these guys have their own, with themselves and with their agents, they have their own competitive reasons why they do these things. But it's important. Hey, what's up, Bob? How are you, man? Good to see you, buddy. It's one of those things where you're just hoping that maybe there's some guys that are cut out of camp that are pretty good. You're hoping that Cody Sorsdal.
You hope that you can develop Sorsdal.
Yeah,
you hope that you can develop
Connor Galvin.
Connor Galvin's a pretty big piece. Look, if the Lions weren't stacked at offensive line talent, the Bears wouldn't have claimed Logan Stenberg. Okay, that was one of the guys that they didn't really expect to kind of waive. So the Bears took him, and what does that say about the Bears? So that's what I'm saying. When we look at the offensive line,
Stenberg was overrated, man. He was a bonehead. He had way too many fucking penalties.
Yeah, but I think when you're Stenberg, you just want to go. You didn't get a chance here. You can't crack the lineup. He couldn't even crack the lineup when Vaitai was out because Evan Brown took his spot. So that just tells you all you need to know about that. But this is a team that is like, this team is ready to win right now. So in my opinion, the Detroit Lions need a wide receiver before the season starts because, like I said, Tyler, you get into week 11, you get into week 10, there's injuries that are going to happen, and you can replace the guy like, let's say Graham Glasgow goes down. You don't want to see that, but eventually someone in the offensive line is going to get dinged up, right? Someone's going to get dinged up on the wide receiver portion. Let's say if Josh Reynolds went down and Khalif Raymond went down, and you're left with who? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the problem that the Detroit Lions have right now, because it doesn't matter what you think about the offensive line. They got an elite offensive line coach. So I'm not worried about the offensive line. I'm more worried about the wide receivers, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I'm always curious if you got to see, like, you got to wait. There's going to be guys that are going to be cut at the end of training camp, or at the end of training camp, and at the end of the season, because you have to go from all training camp. I think you get 90 guys, and you're gonna
90
have to
guys
bring
to
you're
53.
gonna string down to
It's
53. There's gonna be an extra 900 guys that are looking for a team.
Yep.
Um,
So this guy brings up a good point. He said my main concern is quarterback number 2 Teddy isn't the answer. And what I say to that, dude, is a lot of people, they look at Teddy Bridgewater and they see that the way that he played against the Jacksonville Jaguars, not realizing that he had a week of practice, not realizing that when you are learning an offense for the first time, you're trying to learn the cadences, you're trying to learn the nuances to the offense. It's not just about going out there and playing and learning the playbook. It's about, like, you go out there, you got to learn how to, change protections, change audibles. Like, if you're going to do that, that was a perfect spot for Dan Campbell just to throw him out there and see what he can do in live fire when he really doesn't have the, how do you say it? He doesn't have the experience in that offense. That's what I'm saying. And, we know Nate Sudfeld is not a good quarterback. So if he's not a good quarterback, you have to hope that Teddy Bridgewater is, because if Teddy Bridgewater isn't a good quarterback, and at some point, if Jared Goff goes down, you are absolutely screwed. And I don't care if Hendon Hooker is going to come off the bench or not later in the season. He's a rookie. So
yeah, no, and I agree. I think Teddy's one of those guys where he's been in the league so long, like, he will be fine. He's the guy, like, you saw it with the Saints. Look, I don't want Teddy Bridgewater to come and be my starter. Bring Julio in on a vet minimum. Yeah, I
would
would
kind
be
of agree with that.
I'd be cool with that. I would be totally cool with that. But no, as far as what I'm saying with Teddy, like, he's a guy that can come in and if you have to have him for 6 games, he's a guy that can come in and go 3-3 or 4-2 and keep the ship above water. That's all you need. You just need a little bit. You need a guy over 5-6 games to go 3-3 or 4-2, and just not shit the bed, because guys like before, when we come in and we have Tim Boyle and David Blau and Nate Sudfeld coming into the game, they're shitting their pants and they're losing bad. Like, you just need a guy that can come in and be competitive and let the rest of your team do it. He's a good enough game manager. I'm not worried. But
I'm not worried about Teddy Bridgewater either, because, to be honest, if Teddy Bridgewater doesn't work out, let's say he doesn't work out, we're screwed either way. I mean, if you have to bring Hendon Hooker into a game, he's a rookie,
and he's coming off a severe ACL injury.
What can you really expect from him? So that's just, it's so interesting, because a lot of people look at it and they're going, look, Teddy Bridgewater, he didn't look good in his first game. He should have been better. Yes, he should have been better. But guess what? The reality of the situation is this: he came in not knowing the offense in a week, and he did that. So if he learns the offense, you could see him make strides over and over again. And hopefully he's, like, working with Hendon Hooker. And that way, when you go into next year, you can have a backup that you can specifically rely on. And this guy brings up a great point. He says, I don't want Hooker until next season at 100%. I agree with him. If you don't have to start Hendon Hooker, or you don't have to play Hendon Hooker, don't play him. Let him learn the playbook. Let him learn off of Jared Goff and Teddy Bridgewater. You don't want a guy like that. You want Teddy to work out.
And I don't mind. I'm not trying to rush him either. What I hopefully see happening is, Goff getting re-signed and playing out another contract. And at that time, I know Hooker's only 3 years younger than Goff, but at that time, hopefully, by time Hooker's rookie deal is ending, Jared Goff's deal is also ending, and then you can make a decision like, hey, do we think it's good? Hendon Hooker's good enough to hand the reins over to, get him on a friendly, like, team friendly deal for a year or two, let him do what he's got to do, and then you can decide from there long term what you want to do with him. I don't mind the strategy of kind of rolling this out. We need a guy we can develop, and he has great developmental skills. Says Diggs wants out of Buffalo. I haven't heard that a whole lot. I've heard some up and downs about that, but I have not seen anything that's actually like.
I don't know if Diggs wants out of Buffalo, more than I think that's a fabricated story by some of the media. But if he did want out of Buffalo, you make the damn call.
Yeah. Well, so
I
Stephen
know,
A.
I
Smith came.
I know Stephon Diggs is kind of a Looney Tune, but listen, if you can get a guy like Stephon Diggs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, you don't think Amon-Ra St. Brown would be like, look, you better play the way I want you to play because this is my locker room, not
Yeah.
yours, and that's the way it's going to work.
So yeah, so Bob, on that rumor, like I said, I think Stephen A. Smith said something. Which Stephen A. Smith has been saying a bunch of dumb shit lately. I think he's just trying to be relevant. But anyways, he said something about Stephon Diggs not wanting to be there. Stephon Diggs already he reported back to NBC and Fox saying that that's not true, and he loves being
Yeah,
there. And Josh Allen are really close. I think so. To Leo, we need another solid wide receiver. I think there may be some surprise cuts coming. I was looking at a list earlier, and some surprise cuts. A couple people on that list were Sterling Shepard and Anthony
that'd be
Schwartz.
great. Who
I
else?
think I do Anthony Schwartz from Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I think the Giants are a great team to work a deal with. I heard that they're eyeing Aquara. I would actually kind of almost love to package up Aquara and get a guy like Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Jamison Crowder, any of those guys that are like, because they have so many receivers right now.
That's not a bad idea because if Julian Okwara is definitely wanted by the New York Giants, right? If he's wanted and you could swing a trade where it's a player for player trade, and you're getting rid of a guy who, look, people don't want to get rid of Julian Okwara, but the reality of the situation is, if you get rid of Julian Okwara, you want something back in return. So if you get something back like Sterling Shepard or Darius Slayton, like that could really help you out in terms
Absolutely.
of, when you get an injury to the wide receiver position, you can kind of get away from it, and that's what I think right there. That's a
Yeah.
perfect example.
Well, I mean, and like I said, I mean, the Giants, they have Cole Beasley, they have Jamison Crowder, they have Jalen Hyatt, they got Ford Wheaton, who is coming off his torn ACL. They've got Sterling Shepard, they've got Darius Slayton. Like, that's right there with 7 guys, and most teams carry at most 6. So there's gonna be a guy or two that's left out. I mean, and they probably have a couple other receivers I didn't even name. They've got a room of like 10 guys right now, and they need to shrink it down to 6. And that's the thing. We're not looking for like, oh, well, all those guys suck or all those guys are mid. We're not looking for a number 1 or a number 2 option. We have Amon Ra, JMO, and Marvin Jones. Like, we have a good, like, we just need a rotational guy. Like I said, that Sterling Shepard, which I saw that off a Bleacher Report of maybe a surprise cuts. But me seeing that name, I immediately was like, wow, that actually, like, I mean, if he can stay healthy, that's perfect. Like, a guy who's got good role playing talent and can actually come and like provide something of value to your team, but you're not looking for him to come be your savior and change the day. I mean, if you made a trade, you traded Aquara for Sterling Shepard, and you went and signed Julio Watkins or T.Y. Hilton to a 1-year vet minimum. I mean, hey, your wide receiver room ain't too bad, man. Like,
If you can get a Sterling Shepard and he's like your 4th or 5th wide receiver with Khalif Raymond, with Josh Reynolds, maybe you mix in a Dylan Drummond or a Chase Cota, that would be fantastic. But
yeah,
you need right now. Dan Campbell said last week you're needing either 1 or 2 guys to show out, and so far they haven't showed out. And last week was a prime example. Teddy Bridgewater threw some pretty good balls last week, but they were dropped. They're dropped by some of the wide receivers. And this is another thing I want to get to, Tyler, real quick. Because Dan Campbell might not play the starters this week against Carolina. It's not fun for us to watch because it's really not fun to watch because when you're watching the backups who most of the guys won't make the team, you kind of go, okay, guys, like this is going to be fun. Let's just get this over with and hopefully no one gets injured, right? But the reality of the situation is with Dan Campbell not playing the starters, do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I agree that it's not going to be very much fun, and some guys do need to step up. But I also agree completely. I know a lot of these other teams are like, well, the Chiefs play their starters, well, this and that play their starters. Dude, we don't have enough depth. Like I said earlier, uh, you have to you have to see what these guys are made of, and you have to give these backups extended reps and extended looks. And you can't afford for your top tier guys to go down. You can say, oh, the Chiefs do it all they want. Yeah, dude, that's great and all. Like, I've seen Chad Henne come in and win a damn playoff game. I've seen 7th string receivers come in and Mahomes makes them look like prime freaking Jerry Rice. I've seen the story, man. We can't afford it. Like, look, we've got to be honest with ourselves here. If we lose Goff, Amon Ra, Jahmyr Gibbs, or any of our offensive linemen to some stupid idiot ass injury, especially for the season, you might as well throw that season in the garbage.
Yeah, well, I think preseason, he said, Dan Campbell said it perfectly. Preseason is an evaluation stage, right? So you are trying to evaluate some of the players that you don't have a clue on. You know who Brian Branch and Jahmyr Gibbs are. You don't need to play them. You know who Jared Goff is. You don't need to play him. St. Brown, you know who he is. You know who Kirby Joseph is. You don't need to play any of those guys. You need to get a grip on the guys that are, fighting for a spot, like Chase Cota, like Dylan Drummond. There's plenty of guys on the offensive line that are fighting for a job. So when you look at that, that's the way you look at it.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree with you there. I mean, I just, we really got to just hopefully some of these guys show up and show out, and we can, get a couple surprises. So I'm going to let you take over, brother. You guys, I got my softball league championship tonight, so I'm rolling out a little early. So I'm going to go hit some dingers, man, and get some dubs. So you guys have fun, man, and I'll catch you next episode. And Joe, keep killing it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, I'll see you, Tyler. We'll see you in the next episode. All right, I'm taking you guys all the way into the podcast end. So if you have any questions, I'll answer them in the chat. So if you need questions answered, I'll answer them in the chat right now. So let's get it. So the Leo Flores says trade Romeo instead of Julian Okwara. The reason I don't think they're going to trade Romeo instead of Julian Okwara is because I think Julian Okwara has a little bit of a premise on top of him. I think he's a good player. I think he can get it done. Like Romeo Okwara, I think the age being a factor is a total factor. But on the other side, you got to think of it from the Giants' perspective, or any team trading for Romeo Okwara. He's coming off an Achilles injury. You really can't make that trade if you're that team, because you don't know what he can become. You're hoping from a Detroit Lions perspective that Romeo Okwara will be the guy that can help you win games moving forward. Phil said it exactly. These joint practices are insane enough. Shelf the starters. We know what we got. That's exactly what I'm saying. If you know what you got, you know what you have in Kirby Joseph, you know what you have in Jared Goff, you know what you have in St. Brown, why would you even risk it? You don't. Like, if you're not doing those joint practices, then yeah, you do get the preseason reps, because you're eventually going to have to get reps in a live fire event. But if you're doing those joint practices, you don't got to do a damn thing to kind of get these guys ready, because those joint practices, I was at one, Detroit Lions with the New York Giants, and let me tell you, they were practicing at an insane level, but it's more controlled. There's obviously, they're wearing different protective equipment, like the crown, but the reality of the situation is they're going live fire. Preseason, there's a lot of things that can happen. You have guys fighting for jobs that maybe they're like, screw it, let me take out this guy's knee, and then you're screwed for the year. So next thing I want to talk about, I was going to talk about with Tyler, but he left the stream early. He had to go to a softball game. But Brian Branch, guys, I don't know if you are following along what this kid is doing in practice, but he is absolutely dominating to the point where he might unseat Tracy Walker as a starting safety. Listen, I know a lot of you, when we drafted Jahmyr Gibbs with the first round pick, then you drafted Jack Campbell with the second first round pick, then you drafted Sam Laporta with the third first round, that was the second round pick. That was their third pick overall, though. You were like, oh my God, they are repeating the same thing that all Lions regimes have done. But the reality of the situation is Brian Branch might be the steal of the draft. And if you just, how people were saying the positional value of Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. Well, if you just switch Jahmyr Gibbs with Brian Branch, and Brian Branch is a total all-pro type guy, he could be a legit weapons for this team. And if I was the Green Bay Packers, I have no idea in God's green earth why you would ever, and I mean ever, trade with the Detroit Lions, especially with Brian Branch. Like, if you know the Lions are going to go out and get this guy named Brian Branch, why are you trading with him? If I'm a Packers fan, I'd be pretty ticked off at that. And if I was a Lions fan and we traded with the Packers and they got a guy like Brian Branch, I'd be absolutely ticked off. CJ Gardner Johnson is as advertised. This man plays with a violence we haven't seen in a long time. You know what, Phil? You're right. You're right. Because look, I've said it before and I will say it again. Chauncey Gardner Johnson is a guy that you want in your locker room with a young team because not only does he just show you, okay, he hits hard as hell. He comes to play every single snap, but he also has that confidence and that moxie that a young team needs they need to get, right? You see it all the time. When the Chiefs were kind of they're budding towards being a Super Bowl contender. You know who they brought in? They brought in Trayon Matthew. Okay, Trayon Matthew comes in, that defense turns the corner, and they're just like boom. That's the type of moxie. That's the type of confidence that you need in a locker room. And when you can get a guy like Chauncey Gardner Johnson, man, you can really, really make things happen. Um, Yeah, people are saying that Branch is a stud. I totally agree with you guys. I totally agree with you guys on a couple of fronts. But the thing about Brian Branch that really just it wows me in my opinion is like he's a rookie. So like the things that he's doing, diagnosing plays. I was listening to Ross Tucker with John Jansen. He was talking about Brian Branch, the way he diagnoses plays, and some people were talking about how his speed was a reason that he dropped in the draft. Well, let me tell you something. If a guy can get from point A and diagnose someone coming out of the backfield and blow him up, I don't care what his 40 time is. I really don't. Like that's a lot of these general managers, we were the victim of it for a long time. But now that you got Brad Holmes, you could see kind of why, when you need a guy to go get the talent that you need, you finally got it with Brad Holmes because look at the way he's drafted. I mean, just look at it. Aleem McNeil in the later rounds, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch in the second round. You're talking Malcolm Rodriguez, Derek Barnes. The list goes on. St. Brown. He has consistently drafted and developed talent and got him to play at a high level. So that's really good to know. Yeah, Dre Bly. Phil makes a great point. Dre Bly. This is what I say about position coaches. They are so valuable because, like I said, in the offensive line, right? You got an offensive line with Hank Fraley as your offensive line coach. You're going to be really, really put in a great spot because he's a great offensive line coach. When New England was winning all of those, when New England was winning all of those Super Bowls, the one constant besides Tom Brady was Dante Scarnecchia, and he goes really, really unmatched. But when Brady left, so did Scarnecchia. He retired. Scarnecchia is an absolute baller as an offensive line coach, and if you have a coach like that who can get the most out of his talent, you're gonna be really, really well pressed. And we've seen what Hank Fraley did with Coyote Oshika, with guys like that. That's what you need. And like you have great positional head coaches, and you've seen last year when Aubrey Pleasant was fired, how the defense kind of perked up, and that was the way that it's supposed to go. Phil, anytime you want to come, we'll do it all day. We can do this all day, so just come on the show. We'll be fine. So, I look. I know a lot of people are concerned about the hype of the Detroit Lions. I'm gonna tell you this right now. On a variety of fronts, I think the Detroit Lions, the way that they are right now, I think they're going to be a really tough team to beat. I think that when they go to Kansas City, they're really going to ruffle some feathers because if Chris Jones doesn't play, and that's what's going out about Chris Jones, he said he will not play until Week 8 if he doesn't get his contract resolved. And if I'm the Lions, okay, you if if Chris Jones don't play and you're starting a rookie against him, or wait for it, wait for it. Remember the first couple years of the Detroit Lions defense with Matt Patricia? Guess who's their defensive tackle? It's Danny Shelton. So if you remember Danny Shelton, he wasn't no good with the Lions, and I'm pretty sure being a lot older than he is, he's not any good now. So if I'm the Lions and Chris Jones doesn't play, you got a rookie and Danny Shelton being the defensive tackle against Frank Ragnow, Jonah Jackson, and maybe Vitae or Graham Glasgow. Sign me the hell up for that. Sign me the hell up for that. Because Chris Jones is that defense. Let's be totally frank with it. The reason that the Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowls, yes, Patrick Mahomes is a fantastic quarterback, and he's going to make you look just dumb on defense. But when you needed to stop, when the Chiefs needed to stop against the Eagles, Chris Jones was in the middle of everything. This guy was a double-digit sack guy last year. So look, Frank Ragnow is a great center, right? Jonah Jackson is a great guard. Glasgow and Vaitai, they can hold their own. But if there is no Chris Jones, whew, man, you're already starting to get me perked up right now. I'm really just like, wow, that would be amazing if he wasn't playing. So it's they're gonna punch KC in the mouth in the first game of the season. Book it. That's from a comment user. It's huge. If Chris Jones doesn't play in the first game, I'm gonna tell you right now, I would say that's a win because I know they got Patrick Mahomes on the other side of the field. I know that for sure. But if they can't stop the run, and Detroit is just gutting them down the field, Chris Jones, and this is a good comment by Phil. He said them not having Chris Jones is as significant as Aaron Donald on the Rams. Absolutely. Chris Jones is one of the most underrated players in the NFL today. Period. Full stop. He is the most underrated player in the NFL. Just look at the accolades, okay? Go look at the tape. Go watch him. If he's not in there against the Detroit Lions, and they got Jahmyr Gibbs going down the middle and Dave Montgomery going down the middle, they are going to bust a few because Chris Jones is that big of a difference, guys. I don't think we really realize it right now, but Chris Jones not being in the lineup for the Chiefs week 1 would be absolutely a game-changing type thing because they don't have anyone else on the defense that you go, oh my gosh, how are we going to stop this guy, right? Like if you go the second week of the season, Seattle, right? That's a defense that has Tariq Woolen. They have Kobe Bryant. They have Jamal Adams. They have Quandre Diggs. They have Bobby Wagner. They have guys that you go, okay, that's a tough defense right there. You look at the Chiefs defense without Chris Jones, who do you say that about? Absolutely no one. No one. Maybe you say Karlaftis, but he's a little bit young. You know, he's I think Karlaftis is going to be good, but how much of his success was due to having Chris Jones in the middle of that defense? Huge. Chris brings up Starling Thomas, Branch, and Campbell. Absolutely. The way that Brad Holmes has got a UDFA every single year. Think about it. Every UDFA that he has had, Starling Thomas, Brian Branch was a second round pick. Campbell was a first round pick. But we've seen Jerry Jacobs be a undrafted free agent with the Detroit Lions, and he's played meaningful minutes. Starling Thomas can be the next guy that gets meaningful minutes. And let's not even talk about guys like Chase Cota or Dylan Drummond that potentially make the team if they don't make a move at wide receiver, but I think they're going to make a move at wide receiver anyways. It's funny because, like, look. So, you look at the Detroit Lions right now, guys, and when you look at this team, you're just kind of wondering who is going to be, like, the guy that stirs the camel's drink on that defense, right? And, like, when you look at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on that defense, when you look at Kirby Joseph, and you look at that whole kind of how they rebuilt that secondary in 1 year with adding Gardner-Johnson, with adding Brian Branch, with adding Cameron Sutton, you might not get Emmanuel Mosley back for the first couple weeks, but when he comes into play, you're going to have Jerry Jacobs on the bench. Like, that's an abundance of riches. What was a significant weakness last year with the Detroit Lions in terms of their cornerback position is now a significant strength, in my opinion. And when you have guys in the front line like Aiden Hutchinson, like Josh Pascal, like Charles Harris, like James Houston, you can get to the quarterback and you could absolutely just dominate these guys. And I think the defense is going to be a lot better than people think. I think, there was people that were saying, top 15, top 20. I've been fully convinced for the last 2 weeks that I think it's gonna be a top 10 defense. I really do. I think Aiden Hutchinson is a budding star. Okay, I think Jack Campbell could potentially be a star. I think you have a star in the eighth best safety per ESPN when they did those rankings with the coaches, general managers, and scouts. Chauncey Gardner Johnson was ranked the eighth best safety. You have Kirby Joseph, who's going into his second year. I think Kirby Joseph can become a star too. You have all those guys. You have another year of Hutch getting development. You have another year of Pascal getting development. This is things that can help the Detroit Lions move forward, and I am very intrigued about that defense and what they're going to be, what they're going to look like in Week 1. Because when you go out against Patrick Mahomes in Week 1, we all know Patrick Mahomes is just he's a legitimate talent. He's one of the best in the league. And when you get a chance to face him, and if you could hold him down for a couple quarters, your offense is going against a Chris Jones-less defense for the Kansas City Chiefs. Wow, that could really change the tide of that game. And we all know Patrick Mahomes is just an animal and he can come back at any time. But when you have a defense with this much talent as the Detroit Lions right now, I think they have a lot of talent, especially that's really unknown talent. Like Kirby Joseph is relatively unknown in NFL circles, but he will become known over the season. Brian Branch is a rookie, so no one really knows what to expect from him, but I think that he's going to be a guy that's going to step up. Jack Campbell can potentially be a star at that linebacker position, but Aiden Hutchinson entering his second year, becoming a better player, that's what's going to make this team better. If Derek Barnes is comeback player of the year, wow, that would be amazing. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Derek Barnes is going to be a great player. I think Derek Barnes is going to be a good player for this defense. Kelvin Shepard said it, guys. Kelvin Shepard, the linebacker coach for the Detroit Lions, he said it. This team has 4 starting linebackers. In all of your time being a Detroit Lions fan, when was the last time you could say, without a doubt, that the Detroit Lions had 4 starting linebackers? I mean, I remember when we had Stephen Tolick and we had Tahir Whitehead. That was pretty good. You'd have to go back to 91 with Chris Spielman and those guys. I mean, that's pretty good. But have you had 4 starting linebackers on the team at one time? I can't remember. And I'm trying to remember. And guess what? People are saying never. And guess what? I can't remember. I don't even understand. I don't really remember a time when you were like, we have 4 starting linebackers. We're going to be good. I remember when Stephen Tolick, when he tore his ACL doing the discount double check, which was the stupidest damn thing in the world. Because then he just it basically was like I think who was it? We were starting Josh Bynes for the rest of the season, which was just an absolute disaster. But it was just oh my god. But when you lose guys, you're going to lose guys throughout the season. So when you have 4 potential starting linebackers, Anzalone can come off the bench. You can have Malcolm Rodriguez come off the bench. You can have Brian Branch play in the box. You're going to be fine and dandy for this team. And I like the way that they're stood out. But I think the deepest part of the defense, though, last year we wouldn't have said this at all. We wouldn't have said this at all. Your safeties, you have potentially you have 4 starting safeties with Tracy Walker, Chauncey Gardner Johnson, Brian Branch, and Kirby Joseph. So you have 4 starting safeties, you have 4 starting linebackers, and then if you look at the defensive end position, how many of those guys can legitimately play 50, 60 snaps a week? A lot of them. So it's gonna be interesting. But I know Anzalone is starting. I'm saying if he doesn't start and they bring in like a Derek Barnes and they bring in Jack Campbell to start one game, you can bring Alex Anzalone off the bench. That's not gonna happen, but it could potentially happen. All right. So, what else was I gonna get to? Me and Tyler hit on the offensive line earlier in the portion, so if you want to go back and watch that, you can. Also, we're gonna podcast this, so if you're new to this channel, and you're new to this podcast, we have a podcast, Detroit Lions News Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, all those networks that you can go on, so you can download that and listen to it. We'll podcast this episode too, so we have a lot of that. But it's an interesting time because obviously we know with this Carolina game coming up that the starters are not going to play, and I don't. When people get mad at Dan Campbell, I was listening to talk radio today, 97 won the ticket, and I was listening to some of the fans talking about why is Dan Campbell not starting, why is he not playing these starters in a preseason game? And like it dawned on me, you realize the past 2 seasons that we played our starters in the preseason and then we start out slow. I think what Dan Campbell is trying to do with these joint practices is, look, I'm going to get you in situations where you can compete with other teams, but when we get to the preseason games, we're not doing anything. You guys are going to have the day off, and we're going to kind of evaluate these guys. So it's going to be interesting. Barry brings up offensive line depth scares me. Look, if offensive line depth scares you, just take a look at this, okay? They are going to have one of the best offensive line coaches in the game in Hank Fraley. When Dante Scarnecchia with the New England Patriots, I keep repeating myself, but when they had Dante Scarnecchia as the New England Patriots offensive line coach, they never missed a beat. No matter who they brought in, it was always going to get the guy was going to get coached up to play. He was going to have the wherewithal to go in there, and all those times that Tom Brady was running that was running that New England Patriots offense, he had Scarnecchia, and Scarnecchia was a huge part of that New England Patriots dynasty, and I think he's one of the most underrated coaches of all time. Yeah, Jason. So this comes from Jason on Facebook. He says, "Can we talk Teddy Bridgewater? To be honest, I don't know much about him. Is he a good backup? I can't remember us ever having a good backup." All right, Jason. So here's the way it goes. Okay, Teddy Bridgewater is a good backup. He's going to be a guy that can help you out if Jared Goff goes down. And if Jared Goff goes down, well, the season's over anyways. Because I don't care who your quarterback is. If you have Nate Sudfeld coming in the game in week 8, you're screwed. So Teddy Bridgewater is your best option right now. So he started a ton of games. He's gonna win you. He's gonna give you the best chance to win out of all the quarterbacks you have on your roster right now. So if you are looking for a guy that can help you win games, this is the guy. Teddy Bridgewater is the guy that can help you win games if Jared Goff was to go down. And we have the Lions have never really had that backup quarterback that's like been elite. I mean, you'd have to say Shaun Hill. I would say Shaun Hill, but even that was kind of like Dipsy Dory. I don't remember a good backup, but I could say Shaun Hill was pretty damn good. I mean, he came in and did something for the Detroit Lions. That's the issue. So, look, you if you lose your starting quarterback, you're going to be screwed anyways. So, look, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a damn good quarterback for the Detroit Lions. If he has to go in, God willing, hopefully Jared Goff never gets hurt. Hopefully you can keep that under wraps and you can kind of get him going. And he gives you the best chance to win. That's just the way it goes. And if you don't have a backup quarterback in this league that can help you win, I mean, there's only 3 or 4 teams that have that guy. I mean, I don't know what they were doing in San Francisco with all these backup quarterbacks. I mean, they lost quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, and now suddenly Trey Lance is a third string quarterback. You imagine drafting Trey Lance and doing absolutely nothing. Look at that bust. Anyways, look, Phil brings it up. He goes, "I'd expect the O-line to struggle if you got all backups out there starting, but as Phil and guys, we still have plenty of depth on the offensive line." I told Tyler earlier. I told him this earlier that if you have a good offensive lineman like Evan Brown was a pretty damn good offensive lineman. Can we all agree on that? Probably he was pretty good. But when you have a good offensive lineman, just think about all the teams in the NFL, right? Seahawks, Broncos, all the teams that need offensive linemen. If you're an offensive lineman and you're a backup for the Detroit Lions, you're going to go where you can start and potentially make more money down the line. So if I'm the Detroit Lions, if I'm Evan Brown, I'm like, look, I love where I'm at, but I got to go start. So let me go start with the Seattle Seahawks and see if I can earn a bigger check. Usually it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And we see offensive linemen all the time get overpaid for a little limited success, and then they get to their team and they just totally look out of place. We what was it? Sebastian Vollmer, that was the New York Giants right tackle. He was the Patriots right tackle. He went to New York for the payday and absolutely stunk it out of the park. So that's what happens when you're a backup offensive lineman. You kind of show yourself out there, and when you get that, you when you get to that portion and you are dealing with all you're dealing with, that's what could happen with the Detroit Lions. So look, offensive line depth is an issue right now. Um, in my opinion, it's not a big issue. People look at offensive line depth and they go, "Do we have guys that could start coming out of necessity?" Well, yeah, you do. I mean, if Vaitai gets hurt, Glasgow can step in for Frank Ragnow, or he can step in for Jackson, or he can step in for Vaitai. That's what you need. Now you need that swing right tackle, that swing left tackle. You're looking to see if it's Connor Galvin or one of the tackles, maybe Kobe Sorsdahl, but you need someone to become that guy that could help you out with the tackle position. But besides that, any more injuries to your team, you're gonna be kind of stuck. And we've seen what the Detroit Lions did last year with Coyote Oshika coming in against the Buffalo Bills and holding his own in his first regular season game against Ed Oliver. And Ed Oliver is a total menace. And so when you have a coach like Hank Fraley, he coached him up enough to where he knew what was coming with Ed Oliver, and he coached him up just enough to make sure that Oshika didn't get really torn to pieces by the grizzled vet. So that's what you're looking for out of that. Now, the last portion of the show, it's gonna be fun because this whole season is gonna be fun. So we're gonna have season preview probably coming next week when the 53-man roster comes out. That's when we'll have the season preview. Me and Tyler, and we'll have some other people on. So if you want to be on, just let me know if you know me. Anyways, we're gonna have that season preview, so it's gonna be fun to watch. So we're gonna go live on Facebook like we are right now, live on YouTube. YouTube is Between the Whistles Detroit. You can go to our Facebook page, also Between the Whistles Detroit. That's a Detroit sports Facebook page. So just stay tuned to us, guys. We're going to give you great content. This will be shelved into the Detroit Lions News podcast. So if you want to go back over this episode, hear what Tyler was saying earlier, you can go back over it, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. You can listen to it anytime you want. So that's kind of what we're gonna do. We have some special guests coming on in the season, so I'm gonna try to get a star-studded kind of season preview. I want to get, especially for the podcast people, we're gonna have interviews with certain media guys, maybe some players. So stay tuned to that. Also, we need subscribers on YouTube. We are at 130. We are at 1,300 something. Let's get us to 2,000 before the season. I know we can. I got 57,000 followers on the damn Facebook page I got. So just follow, subscribe, and we'll keep you entertained. Obviously, we built a brand with the Detroit Lions News podcast. I mean, the new Detroit Lions News page. So we're looking to do that with the Detroit Lions News podcast. So please help us out. It can help us out a lot. So we will see you in the next episode of the Detroit Lions News podcast. Obviously, Tyler had to run, so we kind of had to work with what we had. So next week we'll definitely have our full studded team, and we'll have more guys that will come on the panel too. So stay tuned to that, and we will see you in the next episode of the Detroit Lions News podcast. See you then, guys.